So I had some starting issues with this tractor since the time I bought it, and when I started it, it just kind of sounded like a really long woo, 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 woo noise. And it was very hard to get this thing started. Today I'm going to show you what I did. It's a very easy fix, but it's a great way to get these tractors to start up. I mean, this sounds almost like starting up a car when I start it, and you're only talking about maybe $100 in parts. What ended up happening to me was I bought the parts 2 years ago, and I finally just put them on because I ultimately decided that I would, since I had the parts on hand and I knew that this was an issue, I would just continue to operate it the way it was until it completely failed. It completely failed, I fixed it. I'm going to show you how I fixed it. So what we're talking about here is the starter and the starter solenoid. If you look here, this whole little section here is pretty much brand new. My starter solenoid was going bad because my starter was having such a hard time kicking over, it was overheating. And where the major failure ended up happening was the starter actually just snapped in half because it got so hot. I'm going to go ahead and assume that this solenoid is bad. A starter solenoid is a really easy repair. There's just 2 bolts here. You undo the bolts, pull this off, take off all your wires, and voila, it pretty much is a 5-minute repair to replace a solenoid on a tractor. So this goes up to the battery. This wire here goes out to the starter. And got another wire back here, goes up to the switch. I have a replacement solenoid here from yesterday's tractor. It's nice and shiny and pretty looking, so we're going to go ahead and just hook the wires up to this one and put it back into place where we just remove the other one. The starter itself, so what the starter comes into the tractor and it's basically a gear, and it spins the gears inside the tractor, starts everything rotating, fires off the spark plugs and gets you going. So this has a, it has a solenoid on top. This is part of the starters, and if one goes bad, the other one's probably bad, so you just buy this as a combination. They don't really sell them in separate pieces. I'm sure if you looked hard enough online, you could find them in separate pieces, but we're not talking a very expensive part here to begin with. So just go ahead and buy the whole thing. I got mine and the solenoid from yesterday's tractors. A brand new starter in the box. I bought it 3 years ago. Just never put it in. That is a great website. They have just about everything on there. The only thing it didn't come with was a new cable. I just grabbed this out of the barn, but if you want to make sure that you're replacing this cable as well, because if yours is anything like mine, by the time all this had gone bad, my cable was pretty much fried because I was really overheating these components trying to spin my old starter. Probably because my starter is taking a lot of heat to crank. It's also taken a toll on these wires. I mean, if you look at this wire, it is really messed up, and then this main power here is also messed up. Now the starter should kick in and out of gear when you start it and spin the engine. My older starter, I'm guessing, was not kicking out. It was very difficult to pull out. There's only 3 bolts on here. After you pull those bolts out, it should relatively easily just slide right on out of there. Mine was kind of stuck in there. I think the gear was staying in gear instead of popping out. This should be able to come out of there. With two hands, I just kind of wiggled it and it came off the gear. And you can see down in here, this is pretty much where our gearbox is going to hook up. This is what spins your engine and makes everything turn on and work.
If you're having an issue, you may have a slight issue pulling the old one out, but don't let that fool you. When you put the new one in, it's going to slide in very easily. There's no seal in here or anything that you need to worry about. It slides right in. There are 3 bolts.
Again, you have basically just these 3 bolts that you have to remove.
The hardest part about installing this was getting this 3rd bolt, which is back behind here. They don't put a bolt down here, which is kind of a saving grace because it'd be impossible to reach. But this top bolt on the back side was very difficult to reach.
Some of these bolts are going to be pretty easy once you start them, like that top one there. But there are bolts on the back side of this engine which are going to be hard, or on the back side of the starter, which are going to be hard to reach. So I have here a couple extensions. To get in here to this last bolt back here, I actually ended up having to take my air intake off to be able to reach back in there. It's a 9/16 socket, and another wrench here that is useful when you're reaching into tight places. One of these wrenches with the spinning majiggies on the back. But the combination of those two, I was able to get back in there. That is not an easy bolt to remove.
I ended up having to take off this air intake, which meant moving the battery and everything else. The other thing when you're working on these components is you want to make sure that you disconnect your battery completely before you do anything with these, because this is hot. This is a hot wire coming in here. If I touch both of those at the same time, it's going to be shocking, and there is enough voltage coming into this that the heat actually cracked my old starter solenoid.
Before you begin this project, you need to make sure that you disconnect your battery, because there's a lot of power running down to that starter. These are heavy-duty batteries, and they will burn you. They won't just shock you, they will burn you.
On some of my previous videos, I have actually shown where you could test to see if it's your starter solenoid or the starter by jumping these two over with a wire. You can do that, and if your starter spins and it spins nicely, then it's probably just a solenoid. The solenoid is the cheapest part. If your starter is making a lot of noise, it really shouldn't make too much noise when you try and start it up. It should be a very smooth sound, and it shouldn't sound like a groaning engine trying to kick over. That is how I knew that my starter was going bad, and if that starter is going bad and you replace your solenoid because it fried it with a new solenoid, you may end up just frying this one as well. So it's better to just replace both of these. You're talking about maybe $125 repair altogether.